Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Alfa Romeo Driver Podcast, brought to you by the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. I'm Guy Swarbrick, and this afternoon I'm joined by Ian Brookfield, who is the proprietor of the SudShop and one of our two Alfasud Registrars. Good afternoon, Ian.
Good afternoon, Guy. Nice to speak to you.
So, Ian, how did you end up owning your first Alfa, and what was it?
I suppose the reason I had my first Alfa was I started my apprenticeship at Thompson and Taylor's in Cobham in 1980. And obviously they were a big Alfa Romeo dealer. And I went in there and I worked on many of the different Alfas, but the Suds were my favourite. And I kind of got the money together for one. And I bought the foreman's wife's Sud TI, 1200 Ti, GYT 130N. Still remember the registration number. But I spent 2 weeks fixing it up, and then I had a big accident in it in Surbiton and wrote it off. So it didn't last very long, that one. But that would be my first one.
And how many, we'll ask a broader question in a minute, but how many Alfasuds have you had in the...
I've had 57 Alfasuds, which I think probably 7 sprints and 50 saloons, something like that.
And any favourites out of the 57?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the absolute favourite is my race car, which I won the Auto Italia Championship with in 1997, which I still have, which I never part with. I suppose I've had so many over the years because they were a disposable item for many years in the Alfa dealership world. But yeah, I've had a few favourites, but that would be my absolute favourite.
So that's your favourite in terms of individual cars. If you think about all the different models and variations of the Alfasud, which is the one that stands out for you?
Well, I think in an ideal world, I'd have a Mark II Ti because they only made them for a couple of years or so. But I just thought they kind of got the looks and everything right with that. The interior was very nice. And I've got as well as the race car, I still own a green cloverleaf, which were obviously the later ones. They're very nice, but there's a little bit of the purity lost in those, I think, when you look at the Mark 1s and the Mark 2s. But I love them all, really.
Any non-Alfasuds in your ownership history?
I've had 76 Alfa Romeos in total. And I can tell I've had a couple of Giulietta, 116 Giuliettas. I've had 3 Alfettas, a couple of 75s, one of which I bought off Michael Lindsay on an old 2.5 V6. Crikey. A couple of 33s, a couple of 156s. My daily drivers are 155. I obviously had a 155 race car, 164 race car, a couple of other 164 road cars. So yes, it didn't take much to get to 76.
I think it takes a bit to get to 76, but 155 is a daily driver. That must be a project and daily driver.
Well, it is a bit. It does. There's always something he's doing on it, but where I work, there's a nice 2-mile hill climb. So I am Gabriele Tarquini for 3 or 4 minutes every morning.
The 2-litre twin spark?
Yeah, 2-litre twin spark.
One of my favourite ever cars. I had one of the few Myrtle green ones.
All right, yeah. I always wanted one, and funny enough, it's a guy who's got a Sud, one of my customers, and I was talking about it, and he said, "Oh, I've got one in my garage." So I've been in there for 8 years. So I kind of rescued it from his garage, and I put my wheels off my race car that got totaled at Brands Hatch, and that's been it, really. It's been very reliable. Been good.
So I think I first met you in the late 1990s, I guess.
Yeah, it would have been late 90s.
You were helping keeping my Sprint green cloverleaf on the road, which was lovely when I got it and not so lovely by the time I got rid of it.
Well, I suppose Just Us came about because Graham Heels and myself were running the register. I think we'd run it since about sort of 1993. And there was an awful lot of Suds that needed work on the register. There were some nice ones, but the majority, there's still people using them as everyday transport then, I suppose. And there were some quite doggy ones, if you like, that needed some help. And there was really nobody and nothing for them. So we decided that would be a good, really for the register side of things, we decided it'd be a good idea and a little bit extra for me to do. And that's where that started from, really.
And that went for what, 3 or 4 years?
3 years we did that, really. So yeah, we did the 3 hard years and then took it as far as we could get.
I think you'd had everything out of my bank account by that point, so it was.
Yeah, I think you were a pretty good customer.
So here we are, a little over 20 years later, and you started another Alfasud Parts business. How different is it this time round?
It's very different this time around. We used to moan that we couldn't get original parts 20 years ago. I'm now moaning I can't get any parts 20 years on. We were always taught in the dealerships that you never fit auto factor parts to an Alfa of any description. And we always poo-pooed them. They were always changed if the car had them on there for a genuine original. But we probably give our right arm to have some aftermarket brake discs, for instance, things like that that many manufacturers made that are just not available anymore.
And I noticed from the parts list that it seems to be almost exclusively service parts in the broadest sense. There's no body
Yeah,
panels, trim parts, anything
no,
like
I mean,
that.
we made the decision because when we started JustSuds, we did go into the body panel side of things because that's what was needed at the time. I think currently in the Sud world with eBay and such like, there's an awful lot of panels out there. Doesn't seem to be a shortage of front wings or anything like that, which you kind of think there was at one stage. So we decided to leave the panels alone because there's a couple of other people doing Suds that have plenty of panels. So I decided to concentrate more on the mechanical side of things. Remanufacturing, that always sounds easy, but in truth, it's not. We've sent rubber stuff away to be priced up, and it comes back and it's very expensive. And you just think, will I be able to sell 300 pedal rubbers with £3 profit in them or whatever? And it's hard. You have to come up with the money up front to get these things done, and it's not always straightforward.
It's quite an interesting time in the classic car world. There seem to be a lot of people who are starting to play with things like 3D printing, which kind of gets around that problem of having to tool up to do a long run because you can do a one-off. Is that something you've thought about?
It is something. I mean, I have spoken to a guy about 3D printing, and he is going to do some stuff for me. I mean, it depends what you ask him to do, I suppose. But we've always been a bit concerned that it's not automotive quality, if you know what I mean, because I don't think all the 3D stuff is as good as possibly it says. So you tend to have to trust the guy that's in charge of the machine, so to speak. So we've been a little bit cautious on that. But we've got a local manufacturing company that are currently making us front engine mountings. Are very, well, I suppose, in view of having one made, they're quite complicated to make because it's two metal plates with rubber in the middle, but it's all got to stay together and support an engine. So, we're trying to pick some stuff like that to have made by proper manufacturing companies rather than, I mean, the 3D stuff's probably good for things like gear lever bushes, but I've got two people I've tried asking to make those and neither's come up with them yet. I'm sure there might be people that watch this that probably think, oh God, I could get them done, but it's whether or not it actually happens.
And I know a lot of the things that I've seen that people have made a lot of fuss about are things that are relatively low stress parts. So things like window winders and things that become very difficult to get. And if you can find one complete one, then you can scan it and make 3D copies of it. But
I don't know how. I mean, I've sent a box full of stuff off to a guy who's going to do some 3D stuff for me, including gear lever gaiters, top ones and bottom ones, which are quite big rubber items. I'm hoping he's going to come up with the goods, but I don't suppose COVID's helping very much. But
no,
everyone seems to be very slow coming back to me, and the quotes seem quite high from where I think they should be, which might just be me being mean, but I suppose there's always a bit of that.
I assume supplies of original Golden Lodge spark plugs have pretty much dried up.
Yeah, they have. They've been dried up for a while, and cracky, we used to buy them in hundreds when we had JustSuds. So you don't. They're not for sale now. They've obviously gone. Speaker have gone out of existence. I mean, I did see a set for sale on eBay the other day, 120 quid.
Bargain.
Just, no one's going to buy them, are they?
No.
I hope not. Anyway.
So what are the plans for the future with the SudShop business?
I suppose the SudShop, really, the plans for the future are to have some stuff remanufactured, to try not to get ahead of ourselves and have too much done to begin with, because you can still fall up. I've had handbrake cables made, and handbrake cables are not available. So I had 5 made. I've sold 1 in 6 months. So I'm not suggesting for a moment they're ungrateful, but.
So how's business been during COVID? I think one of the things that we hear a lot is that the classic car scene's been booming because people have had nothing else to do and have spent lots of time locked away in the garage with their cars.
Yeah, I could definitely go along with that, confirm that, because we had a couple of very busy months, May, June time, and people are at home with their suds. And I suppose that is, it's that you've got time on your hands. It's the time to do it, isn't it?
So ironically for you, as we started to come out of lockdown, it probably went the wrong way.
We did have a quietish month, but I mean, to be fair, it's not my everyday job. It's a part-time business, and I do it for love more than anything else, really. I don't actively go advertising or seeking people out. We're there. The website's there. We advertise in also Italian magazine occasionally. We plan to advertise in the Owners Club for next year. That's probably as much as we'll do on that score. We hope Facebook's a good advertising platform for us. We've got a SudShop page on that, and we do well from abroad on that, Australia, Israel.
So we'll come back to the register later on, but do you have a sense of how big your potential customer base is?
Well, I think the DVLA readout reads something like, I think 83 registered and another 180 odd sold. So there's probably three, but I've always felt with SUDs there's been more out there than people let on. People have them in their garages. They're probably not registered with the DVLA. You know, I've got a race car, so it's getting people to register them on the new register. And we've got about 70 on there, which proves that really if there's 300 on DVLA's books, that we're not getting enough on the real register. Not everybody wants to join it.
You talked about the fact that SudShop's a part-time enterprise. So what's the day job?
Well, my day job is, although I'm officially self-employed, I do 4.5 days for Peter Smart Classic Alphas. There's only Peter and I'm basically his mechanic technician. We do lots of 105, Julias, Alfetas, which is ironic being I'm a Sud man, but anyway, I take the mick a bit and I'll crack on. But we know race engines, restorations. We've got some fantastic stuff in at the moment, to be fair. We're always busy. We've been right through lockdown because there's only Peter and I in the workshop.
Yep.
So that's been handy. We're in the middle of nowhere, so it's been healthy and handy.
So you must have seen a few rare and unusual cars come through the business. Anything that particularly stands out?
Well, we get a lot of Bertoni GTs, being race cars or fast road cars, and we've done a couple of nice Bertonis recently where we've put roll cages and fresh carpet into them, built fast road engine for them, suspension. You know, made them into a sort of, I suppose, a track day car. But we see a lot of Bertonis and a lot of Spiders. I mean, through my time in the trade, I suppose Bellencolville, probably the place for nice cars and Exotica. When I was there doing the Spiders, the right-hand conversions, we had a Maserati service point as well. So I got to know Maserati by turbos quite well. They were quite nice. And obviously there was Lotuses, which we don't always love, but good to drive, not so good to fix.
And any famous customers over the years?
Well, certainly at Bellencolville, we had Jennifer Saunders with a Spider and Aid Edmondson, Nicholas Witchell, the newsman. I think Duncan Goodhue, the swimmer.
Okay.
I think he had a Spider.
For the wind in the hair experience.
Well, possibly for him, yeah. No, yes, my favourite. I shouldn't forget that, really. My daughter was mad on Wallace and Gromit, and Peter Salis and his wife had a Spider.
Fantastic.
And they used to leave it till the battery went flat, so I would be personally sent out to Richmond to jumpstart it for them. And Peter Salis and his wife are very nice people. Very nice people. But I used to say to my daughter, I've seen Wallace today. And she'd go, she's lying.
Yeah. I assume he hadn't made any Wallace style modifications to the Spider. I guess not. No. If you couldn't even get the battery.
Didn't have the wrong trousers on or anything. No.
So we touched on it earlier on. You recently took over the Alfasud Register again, along with Gary Walker. How's that going so far?
Yeah, I think it's going all right. I suppose if you ask Gary and I ourselves, we'd probably say we've had a hard year with the COVID because we've not been able to get out and express ourselves or do anything with the register, meet up with people. I mean, there was the Southern Alpha Day, which I didn't get to, but Gary went to. That's been the only outing, really. So we are looking forward to things being better next year. And obviously, we've got big plans for 2022, which will be the 50th anniversary. So we are working on that sort of thing.
Any plans you can share at this stage, or is it all at a fairly early stage?
It's all at a fairly early stage, really. But I have had the idea of possibly going to Northern Europe to try and get ourselves a bit of a Sud festival and join in with our Dutch, German, French friends that have Alfasuds as well, to see if we can get everyone together at a circuit somewhere, maybe Croix-en-Tenoir in France, but it's all slightly pie in the sky at the moment, really. We've not, nothing's been decided or even talked about, really, apart from Gary and I. That's one of the things we've got an eye on. There'll be plenty in this country as well, and we will do our best to make it north, south, east and west.
Just on to next year, assuming that things get a little bit more normal, which I don't think we can assume at this point, but
Well, no.
Supposing they do, what kind of things do you have in mind for the register for next year?
Well, I think Gary and I would just like to get out and meet everybody. And maybe if we have meetings where there's people turn up who aren't in the register, we can persuade them to join it. You can, I suppose, do what we used to do. There was always concourse for other cars. We'd always do the Sud you most like to take home. Little sort of return to some traditional things like that. But it would just be nice to be in a field with some Suds, really, and everyone's still about chatting. Yeah, our hands are tied a little bit. It's a bit frustrating. We've got the Alfasud Register page up on Facebook, and that's nice and active. Plenty of people on there answering questions, technical queries, things like that. So, yeah, and of course, Gary's got most of the Suds on the register, it would appear. He's got 5 or 6 of them, so it's all good.
And it seems, I mean, maybe it's just I've noticed them more recently, but that after quite a few years of going to lots of Alpha events and there being 1, maybe 2 Suds, maybe a sprint, there seem to be a lot more active owners, and certainly if you look at the Facebook groups and stuff, there's a lot more buzz around Suds and people wanting another Sud again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could put my finger on why that's come around. I suppose they've probably been in the doldrums for a while. So there have always been a bit of the forgotten Alpha to a degree, and I suppose a bit of interest was shown. Not saying starting the SudShop course, that was 18 months ago. We had a very good meeting at Bicester that year, and there was 20 odd Suds there, and it seemed to kick on from there. People seemed to realise that was going on. I think all the Facebook pages really helps. You see all the guys out in Holland, plenty of Suds out there, and they're always very enthusiastic, and I think it's just caught on.
Well, I guess the other thing, I mean, talking about the 50th anniversary coming up, I guess there's probably now a lot of people who had a Sud when they were younger and have now got to the point where their kids have left home, they've got some free time, some disposable income, and they're starting to think about having another one.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, well, I suppose 6 months ago, they were reasonably cheap as well. So, because the prices have really jumped on them the last 6 months, and which is a good thing, as long as it doesn't go too high and all the wrong people end up owning them. But no, I agree. There must be people who had them when they were younger and realise that there's a few out there and perhaps decide to find themselves one. I mean, when they go up for sale, they don't seem to stay up for sale for very long. They do seem to get snapped up.
There still seems to be a huge variation in prices, and I mean, I know there's a huge variation in condition as well.
Yeah, well, if you've asked me 6-7 months ago how much to buy a top quality Sprint, I'd have probably said 10 grand. Well, they're up for sale for 17 currently, and you just think, oh my God. I mean, no one's selling green cloverleafs. There was one up for sale, I think, for 15 to 20 grand recently, and I don't think anyone bought it because I don't think it was as good as they said it was.
Right.
But I suppose you get that in every mark of car that's for sale. You get the people that are going to decide to sell it because the prices are high, and it's whether the person sees through them.
There are so few around. I mean, you said 300 Suds. I can't imagine many of those are Sprints now.
Well, they made Sprints for longer.
True.
They were supposed to be better made and better protected. But yeah, I think it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because they went on till 1989 Sprints. I mean, until we get the register, I suppose, accurate, and we can then decide break the models up. But you'd expect there to be more Sprints around than saloons.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of volume made, there were probably still more Suds than Sprints because it was always a fairly niche car. But they were still making them.
Yeah.
8-9 years later, weren't they? So.
Well, they started making them 78, didn't they? 77, 78, and the Sud started in 73. 74, I suppose.
And when did the Sprint finally ran out in 89?
89 Sprint ran out, and the Sud stopped in 83.
Yeah, so
So
there should be some of the ones that are 6 years younger that should have survived, I guess.
Yeah, but you do wonder whether. Well, I don't think that body protection was any better on the late sprints than it was on anything else. Really,
So, it certainly wasn't on mine, as you know, which was an '88 car.
Yeah.
So yeah. So there is some interest now. We've talked a little bit about prices. If somebody asked you for some advice on what to look for and what to buy because they wanted to revisit their youth and buy an Alfasud, what would you recommend?
Well, I would recommend having a good look, whatever you saw, not rushing into the first one, which I suppose is normal advice for any car. Take someone with you who knows what they're looking for if you don't know yourself. And you have to be careful with Suds because you can't say they just had rusty wheel arches. They had a lot of rusty areas and a lot of them hidden. So yeah, you do need to know what you're looking at. But I'd also say current climate, don't pay too much. It'd be very easy to get overexcited and pay the price they're asking. But
and you mentioned the rust protection getting better or not as they got older.
I don't think it is, because I suppose along the lines of if an early one survived this long, it must have been pretty well looked after, because you do see some very bad Mark III saloons. You know, there's going to be more of them than Mark I's, but perhaps they weren't quite so wrong in the first place with them, because a few have survived. I'd always encourage anyone who went to look at one to, that it was a good car to have, a good classic car to own, because they're very rewarding to drive and own, and maybe underestimated by others.
And are there any little pockets waiting to be discovered? Is there a cache of right-hand drive cars in South Africa or some?
Well, my experience with 105 series cars in South Africa, I would say to people, don't buy anything from South Africa, unless it's red wine, possibly. But no, we see some terrible 105s that apparently are going to be rust-free and certainly aren't. And we have one customer with a South African Sud, and that does seem pretty sound, but I'd always be slightly wary of buying a South African car because the climate's so good they won't have any rust in them. That's not a good enough reason.
But they were exported with the rust already in them, weren't they?
Well, exactly. So, well, they're put together out there, warm climate. I mean, the South African ones are quite interesting because they put things like Giulietta seats in them because they never always got the right seats from. So they did make them up as it went along a little bit. But
and I recently heard they did an Alfasud GTA in South Africa.
Well, I've not heard that one, Guy. But
I
don't. There we go. You've got one on me.
I'll send you some details. Yeah, apparently. I mean, it was just a badge they put on.
I was going to say they do like a bit of badge engineering out there.
Yeah, I think it was. Got a feeling it was just a TI with another badge, but and maybe a different set of wheels. But
I had a 4-door TI South African car, and it was I must admit it was quite different having a 4-door with all the TI bits and bobs on it, and I quite liked it. But I've got to say that was quite rusty, and you do just think, oh, it's supposed to come from a warm climate, but that had no A-frame, no inner wings. It was pretty rotten.
And there's quite a lot of other Alpha models where, particularly Spiders, but not exclusively Spiders, where people are quite happy to bring in a left-hand drive one because they're in good nick and that's all there is around. You don't see an awful lot of left-hand drive Alfasuds here.
No, you don't. I had one, but I mean, out of the 57, I only had one left-hand drive one from Germany. But I mean, you see, obviously on the Dutch Facebook pages, you see plenty of them. But no, I think you're right. It's maybe it hasn't quite reached the Spider Bertoni classic icon, and people are happy to put up with left-hand drive.
Yeah,
because you see quite a few for sale at left-hand drive from abroad, which you could come out and buy and bring back to Britain if you wished. But yeah, I think you're probably right. I think there is a lack of left-hand drive Suds.
And I guess, given the way people drive that kind of classic car now, the fact that it's left-hand drive isn't that big a deal because you're only going to take it out for 40 or 50 miles and then lock it up again for another few weeks. So
no, I don't think it would. Well, certainly wouldn't bother me. I don't think it would be a problem. I'm just trying to think back to when I had my left-hand drive Sud. I just used to get in and drive it like I did any other Sud. Really, it's not. Used to frighten the passenger a little bit, overtaking, maybe. That's about it.
Obviously, the October issue of Alfa Romeo Driver, which came out a week or so ago, was a tribute to John Dooley, who passed away sadly a couple of weeks ago. And John was a huge part of the Alfasud scene in particular, wasn't he, with his racing exploits in the British Saloon Car Championship?
Well, I've got to say, John was my very early inspiration for Suds, really, because Alfasud at Thompson and Taylor's, the foreman whose apprentice I was into his racing, and was always telling me when the dealer team was racing. And a friend of mine, Nick, he and I used to go down to Brands and watch them. And we've watched John freewheeling around Druids in the Sud. And we were actually at Silverstone in 1981 when he nearly won the championship, but won his class. And to be honest, we went to the Grand Prix. We didn't really. We went to see the Sud and John. So, yeah, and I met John a couple of times later on when he was racing the GTV6s. Yeah, it's a sad loss.
There's a fantastic legacy in the not just the Chris Whelan Alfasud, but there's a few ex John Dooley cars out there still pounding around the circuits.
Yeah, and I know there's people doing up the GTV6s. I've been speaking with Chris Whelan. We've been trying to sort out suspension on the dealer team car. I went down and met him at Castle Combe a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, I'm very proud to be involved in trying to help Chris sort that car out that I've seen so many times in the past.
Well, that's all for this episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time on Sunday the 8th of November at 1:30 for one of our regular panel discussions, where I'll be joined by Club Chairman John Griffiths, Club Manager Nick Wright, and Mito Registrar David Faithful. As usual, you'll be able to download episode 18 from iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, and all of the other places you find good podcasts. And now we're available from Audible as well. So until then, stay safe.